Hello, I'm Trent Chapman with Short Sale Genius, and today I'm going to share with you about how to get the bank to release your client of liability. Now, first off, I need to explain one thing that's very important to understand. Now, I'm kind of frustrated by this because as a real estate agent, you should know the difference between release of lien and release of liability, but a lot of agents still don't understand the difference. A release of lien on a property means that the bank is releasing their lien on the property, allowing the house to sell, but it doesn't necessarily mean the bank's forgiving the debt. A lot of people assume if you do a short sale, the bank is forgiving the debt. That's incorrect. If you're doing a short sale and the bank agrees to release the lien and the liability associated with that mortgage, then your client is free from any lien and any future liability on that mortgage balance. So that's a very good and a very important distinction to understand. So when you're negotiating a short sale, you know to ask the bank for a release of liability. Otherwise, your client doesn't see a benefit for them in doing a short sale. Now, in different states, there are laws that protect clients if they let the home foreclose. So if a bank cannot come after your client if it forecloses, then you should very strongly negotiate with the bank to make sure that they won't come after your client if they do a short sale. Because you see, some states have laws that protect the client in a foreclosure, but if that client agrees to sell the property but doesn't ask the bank to release the liability associated with that mortgage, they're not protected under the foreclosure laws for that state because there was not a foreclosure, it was a short sale, and the terms were agreed to by the seller and their lender. So if you have a seller that wants to do a short sale and is assuming that they're not going to be liable for the balance of that loan, make sure that you get a release of lien and a release of liability written on that contract, that approval letter from the lender. So how do you do it in states where, let's say for example in Florida, where there's not very good laws to protect the homeowner and they don't really give a full release of liability if they let the home foreclose. If they let the home foreclose, the bank does a judicial foreclosure, they have the ability to collect on the balance of that loan. So if you're in a state like that, how can you negotiate with the bank to actually release them of a liability if the bank knows they can foreclose and sue the homeowner? Well, you got to ask yourself, if you were the bank, how many of your clients would you sue after a short sale or after a foreclosure? Well, you wouldn't sue any of them if they didn't have any money for you to obtain, because it does cost money to sue a homeowner and to get a judgment. Now, in the cases where it's a judicial foreclosure state, they may already go through the process, but if you can avoid that process and not have to go through the judicial foreclosure and spend the money, then they would be better off doing a short sale and taking the proceeds from the short sale, which are usually higher than a foreclosure or an REO sale, and that way they're going to get a better return without having to go through the expensive process of trying to get a judgment against a client. Because if they get a judgment and there's no assets to which they can attach that judgment, of what value is that judgment? For most people, they'll see a very little value, and they won't really want to pursue that option if they can get more money with the short sale. So for example, in the state of California, if a client has a rental property and they refinance that loan and now it's going to foreclosure and they have a second lien that was also refinanced, that first lender may foreclose, and in California that wipes out all liability. But the second lender now has the right to sue that client for the balance. So that second lender may choose to obtain a judgment by way of through a court proceeding and spend the money to get a judgment against the client, but only if that client has assets to which they can attach that judgment. Most banks do not want to go to the expense of getting a judgment on every single client if they don't believe they'll be able to collect on that judgment. So keep in mind, a bank will only do what's going to make them more money. So if a short sale makes them more money than a foreclosure, many times you can use this as leverage alone to explain to them, look, at the client sees no benefit in doing a short sale if the same liability exists with the foreclosure. If it's less liability to do the short sale and you're going to release them of all liability associated with this loan, then they will agree to do the short sale, which will in essence make you more money because they don't have any assets or anything to which you can attach your judgment if you do obtain a judgment after the foreclosure. So this is a conversation that, again, you can have it with your negotiator. It's probably going to be over their head. They're not going to understand it. So you're going to have to give this information to someone of higher authority within the bank. Oftentimes it's difficult to do by phone, but by email you can actually get a hold of people who are of a higher authority within the bank, and they will either delegate it to someone else who has the power to look at your case and make a decision, or they themselves may actually make a decision on that and notify your negotiator to approve that short sale with the release of liability. There's a lot more detail that goes into working with banks and getting release of liability, but this is basically the short answer on how to get a bank to release your client of liability, even in states where typically they will not release the liability even with the foreclosure. If you'd like to get more information and watch more videos about how to negotiate with short sales with banks, go ahead and click on the link down below and it says watch the next video.